My name's Jeffrey Little. I'm the Sergeant and Director of Club Service, Rotary Club of Sydney, and I'd like to welcome you all to our second Rotary Club of Sydney meeting for the second century of its existence. A particular welcome to our guest speaker, Mark Latham. Welcome, Mark, and you will be more formally welcomed very shortly. I'm going to hand over to President Mark, who will be hosting today's meeting.
Thanks, Jeff.
With yours truly. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jeffrey. Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see you all here today at this meeting of the Rotary Club of Sydney. It is, in fact, my third meeting as President. It's a great pleasure to have the Honourable Mark Latham, MLC, with us. Welcome, Mr. Latham. Thank you for joining us today. And as Jeffrey mentioned, we'll, we have a formal introduction for you very shortly. There's a couple of things that we like to do at the Rotary Club before we get into, or before we, start with our guest speaker. My name is Mark Dyer, and I'd like to start this meeting of the Rotary Club of Sydney by acknowledging the traditional owners of our lands. We're spread far and wide across Sydney and New South Wales, and even further afield, I think, usually. I'm coming to you from Lane Cove. It's Camaragal country, and the Camaragal people are a clan of the Eora tribe. It's a beautiful country, and I want to start our meeting by paying my respects to their elders past and present, and I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders that may be joining us today. The Aboriginal peoples occupied these lands for something like 75,000 years, confirming that, they're probably the oldest continuous culture on the planet. While that's hard to put into perspective, it's my hope that one day we can, as a nation, genuinely embrace and celebrate that achievement. The Rotary Club of Sydney is proud to embrace the Uluru Statement from the Heart. I can see that we have quite a lot of visitors joining us today, and I'd like to extend a special welcome to you. Hopefully, we have our Assistant District Governor Rick Vasilla with us. If you're with us, Rick, I extend a special welcome to you. Thank you. I just would like everyone to know that this is a safe space, and we're interested to welcome all new people into Rotary, especially people of action. Now, Adrienne, we were going to just do a little quick straw poll, weren't we? Can you maybe launch that? We just want to see, what your background is, in relation to what you know about Rotary. Here we go. That's the results. Is it? I don't know if everyone can see that. So just two questions. What's your connection to the club, and have you attended one of our meetings before? Or in fact, have you been to a Rotary meeting before? Is what we're interested to know. And I think we're at, how do we know when this is done, Adrienne?
It'll show us that most or all participants will have voted. So I think we're at 80% right now. If anybody else would like to participate in the poll?
Well, look, so far it's saying that we've got 21% of the attendees as visitors. Excuse me. That just went down the wrong way. That's water, by the way. So you're very welcome to attend, and thank you for joining us. And indeed, the same number of people, it's their first time with Rotary. So look, that's a very exciting thing for me and for us as Rotarians. I I wouldn't mind if somebody might like to unmute and just, tell us what they might know about Rotary. I guess we don't know, but if someone's prepared to unmute and just give us a little bit of what your impression is about Rotary or what you might have heard of Rotary. Can we nominate somebody from the audience? It's quite hard, isn't it, when you're on Zoom? What about Michael Newman? Michael, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Now, are you one of the people that hasn't been to a Rotary meeting before?
Yeah, that's right.
Excellent. Welcome. Great to have you.
Thank you.
What's your impression of Rotary?
Actually, I don't know too much about Rotary, to be honest. I know it does involve public speaking, but I'm mainly here because of your speaker, the Honourable Mark Latham, especially on the topic he's speaking about today. And I've heard him speak before on freedoms, particularly in Australia. And so I'm curious, again, to hear his views, because he's a great speaker and he articulates very well.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Michael. We're all looking forward to hearing Mr. Latham speak. Maybe can I choose somebody else? Adrienne, I don't know if I have everyone on my screen. Do we have a lady that might be prepared to unmute to tell us what their understanding or association or thoughts about Rotary are? Let me see. Adrienne, can you help me choose?
I think that if people are uncomfortable unmuting, that's fine. They can also say hello and where they're coming from in the chat box. Yeah,
okay. Well, that's a good idea. Let me open that. Excellent. All right. Well, look. Let me share a little bit about Rotary with our guests. We're 1,100 clubs, 1,100 clubs across Australia, and more than 30,000 active members. You probably might have seen a Rotary logo as you travel around country Victoria, country New South Wales, or anywhere as you enter a town. Rotary is a global network, though, of 1.2 million neighbours, friends, leaders, and problem solvers. People who see the world where people unite to take action to create lasting change across the globe in our communities and in ourselves. It's a nice vision, I think, and that's certainly why I'm here. A world where people unite and take action to create lasting change, or as we like to say, to serve to change lives. Rotary members believe that we have a shared responsibility to take action on our world's most persistent issues. 35,000 clubs across the globe work together to promote peace, to fight disease, to provide clean water, sanitation and hygiene, to save mothers and children, to support education, to grow local economies, and to protect the environment. Now, that was 7 things, and they're our 7 areas of focus. Our mission is to provide service to others, promote integrity, and advance world understanding, goodwill, and peace through our fellowship of business, professional, and community leaders. Our weekly meeting that we have, like today, is just one of the things that we do to promote this. As I mentioned before, our vision is a world where people unite and take action to create lasting change across the globe in our communities and in ourselves. So look, that's just a little bit about Rotary for the benefit of our guests, and also a reminder for our visitors, for our members, if that's needed. The other thing I wanted to do, which is something that we occasionally like to do in Rotary, is to talk about our test. And it's a tradition at our meetings to remember our test, I've just changed my background there. We call it the 4-way test. And it gives us a framework for how we like to behave. I regularly refer to it at home, at work, everywhere. Frankly, it's a very good reference. So of the things that we think, say and do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And will it be beneficial to all concerned? So if we can tick these 4 things, we can be confident in our actions. And I'll just change my background back. I think I did that reasonably well, if I do say so myself. Look, we have a couple of very quick announcements from some of our members. And I'd like firstly to introduce past President John Given to give us an update on his project.
Thank you, President Mark. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Mark Latham. Good to see you today. I'm the organiser, along with a few other people, of the New South Wales State Police Awards. We are still doing our best to proceed this year, which will be held on the 5th of November at the Hyatt Hotel in Darling Harbour. Nominations are currently open, and currently we have from over the state 150 nominations. Nominations close on the 27th of August. Normally what we have is a mad rush in the last 2 weeks as commanders and Rotary clubs get the nominations in. So we're still going ahead. If anybody, any of our members or their family or friends wish to nominate, they can go onto the Rotary Club of Sydney website. There is a section on there where you can link to a nomination, put in your favourite police officer, somebody who's done something for you or you've seen been done over the last couple of years. And definitely over the last 2 years, they've been a busy police force with fires, droughts, floods, COVID, border patrol, quarantine control. They've been doing it. And never has it been more important that we recognise excellence in policing than through these state awards, which Rotary, or the Rotary Club of Sydney, is proud to be the host on behalf of the 410 clubs in New South Wales. We make a donation to the Rotary Foundation and to Police Legacy of any excess funds from the evening. And the only way we can get excess funds is through the normal Rotary way of raffles and auctions. So if any member out there has got an item that I can auction or put in as a raffle prize, I plead with you, please get in touch with me. I'll be too happy to receive all contributions. And these contributions help make us some money that we can then donate back to those worthy causes. This year in attendance so far, we will have Her Excellency, the Honourable Margaret Beasley, our Governor, New South Wales, will be in attendance, along with the Police Minister, the Police Commissioner, many of the Deputy Commissioners, other senior ranking officials, but most importantly, family, friends of officers from all over New South Wales. It's an excellent evening for those who have been there, as you know. For those who haven't, for $100, you get the best night's entertainment that Sydney's got to offer. And I say that COVID allowing. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, members. Thank you for your support.
Thanks.
Yes, I hope Mark Latham's name can maybe be included in that invite list. Thank you.
Absolutely. $100, John, that's cheap at twice the price, really. Put me down for that. Thanks very much for that, John. Can I now just call on James Allen to give us an update on your project, John? James.
Thanks, Mark. I think as everyone, or certainly members of the club will be aware, we started about 4 years ago a project to celebrate the centenary of Rotary in Australia and New Zealand, a major international project. For the benefits of our visitors, this project aims to introduced 3 new vaccines, HPV, rotavirus and pneumococcal vaccine, into 9 Pacific Island countries. And we're working in partnership with UNICEF on this project. And so this is an opportunity to, I guess, give you all a bit of an update of where we've got to. The implementation of this started towards the beginning of last year, of course, just at the time that the COVID pandemic was hitting. COVID, but it has continued in that time. I mean, COVID has slowed it up a bit, but it's actually making good progress, although we're probably 6 to 9 months behind where we might have been otherwise. We've raised something like about just over $2 million, $2 million US for this project, which has been a fantastic effort, and that's been enough. Will fund basically the first 2 years of the project, and we still need to fund the final year of it. It's a 3 to 4 year project. Well, it started out as 3. It'll probably end up being closer to 4 because of COVID. But we've still got some work to do. The first vaccines have been administered to the kids, and a key part of this is clearly strengthening the health systems in each of these countries so that they can sustainably continue these vaccines into the future. The aim is to vaccinate 100,000 kids over the next 3 to 4 years, but more importantly, to embed these vaccines into the health systems of each of these countries. So it's a great project. We've still got more to do, but we're really making good progress. So thanks everyone for your support today, and we just now need to move and get it finished. Thanks.
That's fantastic, James. What a great project, saving the lives of many young children in the Pacific regions. Thank you very much for that update. Now, as we know, we've been hearing from some of our members and some of their project and areas each week, and we're going to continue this. So next week we hope to have Thelma talk about sustainability, and hopefully David's going to talk about his activities on the Peace Committee. Now, I think we should move on to our main event if we can, and I'm going to invite Colin Westman to introduce Mr. Latham. Now, Mark, am I assuming correctly that you'd be happy to take some questions at the end of your address?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, looking forward to that.
Yeah, excellent. All right. Well, look, because it's just busy and there's a bit of chat activity and so on, if you have a question, can you please address it to me, and I will do my very best to get to as many questions as I can. But please address to me, Mark Dyer, in the chat, just to separate it from other chat items in there. Cole, can you unmute and introduce Mr. Latham?
Okay, I've done that. So thanks, President Mark. It's my pleasure now to introduce the Honourable Mark Latham, MLC. So following his graduation from university in 1982, Mark has worked for a series of Labor politicians, including John Kerrin, Gough Whitlam, and Bob Carr. Mark served as Mayor of Liverpool Council between 1991 and 1994, having been elected to Liverpool Council in 1987. In national politics, Mark was the member for Wherrywa for 11 years, a shadow Labor minister and leader of the opposition 2003 to 2005, and came very, very close, it must be said, to being Prime Minister. In November 2018, Mark Latham announced his candidacy for the New South Wales Legislative Council as the state leader of Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party. In 2019, he was elected to the New South Wales Upper House with the highest personal vote below the line in the ballot. So after a 14-year break, Mark has re-entered Parliament with a strong focus on policy issues in the education, urban planning, energy and law reform portfolios. One nation has part of the balance of power in the New South Wales Legislative Council. In recent times, Mark has written some very interesting, very good, I think, articles on social issues, particularly those involving family values. So over to Mark.
Well, thanks very much, Colin, Mark, Jeffrey, and Adrian, who played a role in organising this gathering. I had hoped to see you in person at Castlereagh Street, but COVID, of course, and lockdowns have got in the way. Over the years, Colin mentioned my service in local and national Parliament, and I've always had a pretty good association with Rotary here in Southwest Sydney. The Narellan Club, for instance, set year after year fundraising records and do incredibly important work and service in our community. I worked with them, well, what is it now, 3 years ago for the centenary of the end of World War I to restore the Brownlow Hill War Memorial just to the northwest of Camden, which was a great project honouring the service of our diggers, and it's something that we're proud of to see it restored to its former glory. So Rotary does a wonderful job, and I congratulate everyone for their community service and the important contributions that you make in a whole range of areas, Australia and beyond. Today, my address is entitled "The Fight for Freedom," and I suppose the immediate issue is to talk about the thing that dominates the news cycle, dominates our lives now, COVID and the lockdown. My interpretation as a state parliamentarian of what's happened is that, yes, the Berejiklian government got a lot of credit, particularly compared to Victoria, for how they handled the COVID situation. But sometimes in politics, the worst thing you can do is believe your own propaganda and talk of a gold standard, and somehow New South Wales was automatically superior to Victoria and other states was always dangerous. It always ran the risk of breeding complacency about what needed to happen here. And I think that complacency was reinforced earlier in the year when the government had a very successful lockdown of COVID on the northern beaches of Sydney. Now, the northern beaches, which tends to be middle-class area, people with well-apportioned offices, working online, enjoying ocean views and other assets, it's very different to where the main problem has been over the last couple of months in Western Sydney communities like Canterbury, Cumberland and Fairfield, where you've got communities low income, some newly arrived to Australia, a lower level of English language skills, so not everyone automatically knows what the health orders are or follows the daily press conference to get their instructions about staying at home and the like. So locking down those areas and finding compliance was always going to be a lot tougher than the northern beaches. I think one of the things we've uncovered, you look at some of the details of the cases, is the strength of the cash economy in some of those communities, people who aren't inclined to participate, to cooperate with QR codes and tell contact tracers where they've been. It's meant that the Delta strain, which is more infectious than past strains, has got out of control, and now all of New South Wales is in lockdown. Where are we headed out of this? Obviously, the vaccination program is important. There has been a lot of criticism of the federal government. I think it's fair to say that Scott Morrison bet on red, but it came up black. He bet heavily on AstraZeneca. He missed the chance at the end of last year to load up heavier on Pfizer. And in the way of people, judging the evidence and looking at the vaccines, I can say Australia is not by nature an anti-vaxxer country. You look at our very, very high rates of childcare and youth immunisation. I think our childcare centres are over 98% of kids that are vaccinated against all the illnesses, diseases for which we're familiar. So we're not an anti-vaccination, but I think Australians are also naturally cautious. A lot of people are vaxlators who want 6-9 months of evidence, have a look at how things are playing out. And I think some of the anecdotal reports people have had about adverse reactions to AstraZeneca, the comments of the Queensland Chief Health Officer, the fact we've had 7 deaths, tragic in their own right, from AstraZeneca, led to some hesitancy in Australia. It meant that betting on one vaccine was a high-risk proposition. It didn't work out. And now there's been a scramble, in some places a mad scramble, to try and get vaccinated. The rates are lifting, which is good. We all want to get to herd immunity, but we also want to protect some of the basic freedoms in our society, that no one gets to make your health choices for you. We've always had a very important principle of our democracy, of our society, that medical procedures can't be imposed. They need to be the subject of informed consent by the individual, particularly in the case of vaccination. So getting that balance right between reaching some form of herd immunity and respecting individual freedoms is important. I'm an opponent of vaccine passports for a whole range of reasons. I'd urge any business looking at mandatory worker vaccination to study the law carefully. It's very complex. I've been doing a lot of work on it in the past week or so, looking at employment law, work health safety provisions, anti-discrimination law, privacy provisions. This is a very complex area, and I would urge businesses not to jump in, as say Craig Laundy and his hotels have, or SBC in Victoria. Get some advice, study the information. There was a very good outline of the complexity of it, but also some guidelines on employment law issued by the Fair Work Ombudsman late last week. You can see that on her website to study what's been written up there. It's a pretty comprehensive report, and it goes to the basic fact that, of course, workers have rights. Businesses have an obligation under work health and safety to provide a safe and healthy workplace. But the balance there and some of the legal complexities mean that jumping in will probably lead to litigation at the expense of a business, whereas a more cautious, prudent approach, which sometimes is going to rely on state government health orders, is probably going to be how this plays out much more than the Craig Laundy foghorn approach of just announcing that all customers and all workers should be automatically vaccinated. So where do we head? A lot of epidemiologists now, these disease experts, are saying that herd immunity is very hard to reach with the Delta strain, because you can be vaccinated but still carry the virus, and also because the Delta strain can be carried by children much more than the previous variants. So this is a reality that they're facing also overseas. The Doherty report here in Australia said that if you get to 70% adult vaccination rate, that's coming closer to herd immunity. 80% is desirable, but 80% right there for adults is only 63% of the overall Australian population. And if children carry the Delta, then of course 63% is well short of herd immunity. I think for Australia, we might be upside down, as our geography suggests, from the Northern Hemisphere experience. You look at countries like the UK, where they've got to 90% vaccination rate, first dose for adults, 77% double dose, but they've had 6.3 million COVID cases. That's 10% of their population. And this is doing it the hard way, of course, and they went through to hell and back. But that gives them 10% of their citizens have a natural immunity and acquired immunity to COVID, because they've actually had the virus itself. In Australia, we've only had 40,000 cases, 40,000, which is only 0.16% of our population that have got an acquired immunity. So we're relying almost entirely on vaccination to get closer to herd immunity, which is hard with Delta in any case. So countries like the UK, also Sweden had over 1 million cases for a 10 million population, so 10% with acquired immunity, and they've got 81% one dose of the vaccine, 60% double dose. So those countries have been ahead of us in the vaccination program, and their 10% base of acquired immunity gives them a stronger advantage. It may well be. And we heard inklings of this from the WA Premier Mark McGowan on the weekend, that Australia has the reverse experience, that we go out as best we can on vaccination, but we can't live in lockdowns forever. Discerning adults have made a choice to get vaccinated or not. Everyone knows what COVID is, what the hygiene, the social distancing, the PPE, the mask arrangements are. We in Australia might be relying on a base of vaccination, but without any acquired immunity of note. And responsible adults need to go out there and make their choices. The alternative in Australia, I think, will be a much longer period of lockdown than the rest of the world, and huge economic disadvantage as a result, where we'll be cut off from the global economy. We won't be trading. We'll be in, a series of rolling recessions. Governments have a big choice, and at New South Wales, where obviously these numbers in the 400s show that the lockdown hasn't worked over the 7-week period. They're still not huge numbers compared to the international experience, but the Premier's line is, well, if you get to 70% or 80%, you get some more freedoms. It's hard to have less freedom than what we've got at the moment. It's a very vague commitment as to where we go. My worry is in New South Wales, and certainly we heard from WA, that the government obsession with lockdowns has become intoxicating, and it will continue no matter the vaccination rate, because the virus will still be circulating in the community. Politicians who've been able to control the detail of people's lives love that control. They don't want to let go of it. Their opinion polling tells them it's been popular to this point in time, although some of their approval ratings are now dropping pretty quickly. We're at a tipping point where we may well get to a situation where people just walk free. I mean, if you're double vaccinated in Sydney and you're living in lockdown, you're wondering why you've done the right thing, made the sacrifice, and you've still got no freedom. And unless our politicians avoid a much longer period of lockdown than the rest of the world, I think we'll see more people walking free, thinking, well, I'm a responsible adult, I'm double vaccinated, I know the score with COVID, I'm out there to live my life. And at the end of the day, you can't be preserving life by not living at all, which is the option that many people are now contemplating. So it's a difficult situation, but I wouldn't think we're in the clear by any means, just because the vaccination rate might get to 80% of adults. That's not herd immunity once you factor in children. Epidemiologists are saying Delta is different, and you need a combination of the vaccination rate and acquired natural immunity to actually have a freer society like they do now in the UK, where if you watch the EPL soccer or the Lord's Test match last night, you can see people there just going about their normal life without masks, going to the cricket, going to the soccer, and doing what we in Australia now regard as with great envy, just as other countries used to envy us at one stage. So we could be having the reverse experience. What does post-COVID look like? Let's hope we can actually have that as a reality one day. In the state parliament, I know I'm making time for Q&A, but I'll just run through a list of the things I'm interested in, because obviously if we come out of the COVID period at some stage, we need a huge focus on productivity improvements, economic growth, jobs, getting back to normal in terms of our economic freedoms, as well as our social freedoms. And stamp duty reform is important, fast-tracking the development system, improving the education system, where unfortunately Australia's school results have slid badly on an international scale over the last 20 years. I'm worried about the sustainability of 100% renewable electricity generation in New South Wales. Resource development is important, taking the shackles off the resource sector here, because they normally get knocked back by the so-called Independent Planning Commission, and ensuring that our public service in the state is not a branch of left-wing woke politics with PC and distracted by their own political indulgences, but actually provides value for money and a strong edge of customer service for the people of New South Wales. And if I could recommend one thing with regard to that productivity agenda, New South Wales is fortunate. We have a very good productivity commissioner who's recently completed a white paper with a whole range of reforms, a real encyclopedia of where we need to head to reboot our economy in a post-COVID environment. So if you can go to the Productivity Commissioner's white paper, which is on the webpage of the New South Wales Treasury, you'll get a pretty good outline of what's possible and a very good agenda that's been driven by the Treasurer, Dominic Perrottet, and the Productivity Commissioner for the benefit of the future growth of the state economy. So Mark and Colin, happy to leave it at that point in my formal remarks, but also very, very happy to answer any questions as they arise. Thanks for having me.
Got to unmute. Thank you, Mr. Latham. You're very welcome. Thank you for your comments there. It is a very difficult period of transition, isn't it, to get us from where we are at the moment back to attending the rugby league and other sporting events like that. So we welcome your comments on that. I must say I have friends who would love to be vaccinated, but they just can't. And I'm really concerned about the group of people that are in that category once we do open up. And, because even though we can be vaccinated, I understand that we can still transmit this to others who may not be. So, I mean, it just seems to be terribly complicated, all this. We had a couple of questions. You mentioned state parliament. Now, we've all been following your career, for a long time. You've been on our TV screens and in our parliaments and what have you. You've been in, politics is cold red for a long time, so you obviously love it. I wonder what it was that attracted you to it initially, and is that still your motivation, or has your motivation changed? Since you were young, getting into the Liverpool Council.
Well, I sometimes joke, having been 14 years out of Parliament, I stood in the sun too long one day and had a moment of madness in wanting to go back in. But the serious answer is my motivation was about the school education system. Our results have tanked badly. One of the paradoxes in schools policy is that we know what works. There's been squillions of studies around the world to define the things that actually get results in the classroom. But for reasons of fad, fashion, and sometimes ideology, those practices aren't followed in the classroom. And the New South Wales school system has certainly deviated from best practice, and that's why the results have fallen. So I saw that in the education of my own children. I've got particular worries of where our public education system is headed. One of the most important responsibilities of government is to give young people the best start in life. That makes ultimately for a strong, successful society. And if we're not doing that, then, I think we've all got a responsibility. So the state government runs, obviously, public education and has a big say in the private school system as well. So I wanted to get back into state parliament to focus as much as I could on education. I chair the Upper House Education Committee, where we produce some fairly influential reports about performance measurement and performance success, reform of education, the curriculum system, and most recently we're working on parental rights, which are a big issue as well. So I've been very happy with that. Obviously all issues, including education, have been swept under the blanket of COVID coverage, but we've achieved some good things in that regard. Being in a small party, like One Nation, is different to a big party like the ALP. Being in the upper house is different to having a lower house constituency where you're very busy with your local representation and events. But I've enjoyed it so far. I've been surprised by some things in the state parliament, but pretty happy overall with the focus I've been able to give to school policy reform.
Yeah, excellent. I was going to ask you about that. We've had a few questions come in because you were elected at first count. I think you were almost the first elected in 2019. And
no, the Labor Party and the coalition ticket would have been ahead of us, and also the Greens. So I would have been the fourth elected out of the 21.
Right. Okay. But still elected on first count, I understand.
Yeah.
Proportional representation and all. So you're being a party member, you might have thought of being an independent, or what's can you elaborate on why you're a party member? Is it something to do with One Nation, or can you just sort of give us a bit of your thoughts on that subject?
Well, I think a lot of the policies of One Nation have got appeal to people, and I had that feedback in my community around Camden Way in southwest Sydney. But there was a chance to try and do as much as I could to make One Nation mainstream on its focus on issues. I joined the party and said, well, look, there's been some past tendencies here that might be seen as discriminatory. No more of that. Let's focus on mainstream issues to do with education, service delivery. Obviously, we're a party that believes in freedom of speech, very strongly sceptical about the authority of government. We don't follow the rules of political correctness. We try to speak directly and honestly about issues and put the facts out there as best we can. So, you know, I think they were all very good approaches, but it was the issue selection where One Nation at state level could get some things done. And I thought it had that potential. And I know when I joined the upper house, some of the members there were thinking, well, you know, this could be a period of wild stunts and crazy activity in the upper house, but they've been struck by how mainstream we've been. My approach with One Nation in New South Wales is that, and I often say this to people I know inside the Labor Party in Macquarie Street, we're really articulating the policies and values that Labor had in the 1980s, before Labor embraced identity politics, PC, got off on its climate change, environmentalism at the expense of working class jobs. So we're doing the things that Labor was about in the 80s, which was the golden era of Labor Party government and achievement. So I think that's a useful gap to fill in the system. All the major parties have gone further to what they call the progressive side of politics. I see us as mainstream, not necessarily conservative, but certainly try and look after people who would otherwise lose their jobs or lose their voice in the political system.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Now, my neighbour is doing some woodworking, so if his power saw interrupts us, I apologise. That's just the beauty of working from home. A few more questions have come in, and about. So Cole asks, in 1968, Cole, when you did your HSC, my gosh, only the best students were able to go into teaching. Now students are now standards are a lot lower. Look, we work closely with students. Our youth committee works closely with students, and certainly with the National Youth Science Forum that we're supporting. Our young people, our young ladies are saying they're interested in science because of the passion of the teacher, the inspiration of their teacher. Do you think, I mean, I don't know about this question, Cole, but do you think average students can inspire great students?
You see what I'm getting at there?
About the quality of teachers, right?
Yeah. I mean, teachers that were good students, I think, can inspire students to be good students. I'm just asking the question, can someone who is just an average student inspire and produce great students? Well, if they can't, we got a major problem.
Yeah, anything's possible. But I think that the big issue is about the status of teaching. Certainly in 1968, or when I finished school 10 years later, teaching had a status in the community that was more elevated than it is today. You know, back then to become a teacher was seen as a really important profession. The money was pretty good, but with the opening of our economy and, you know, things like the financial markets, business advisory roles, the tourism sector's explosion, a lot of young people leaving school can find a lot more money in other areas a lot easier than they could 40 or 50 years ago. So we've got to pay teachers more, but I think teachers and their trade union have got to accept the reality with improved payment comes the professional standard of performance measurement, performance pay. And if you're not up to the job, well, you have to go find a different job. And for a teaching profession of 70,000 in New South Wales, they probably sack 1 or 2 a year. I mean, it's just incredible to think we've only got 1 or 2 underperforming teachers. So with extra pay comes those professional standards. So we've got to do a lot to improve the status of teaching. I asked my eldest son when he left high school 3 years ago, I said, well, all your cohort there, what would they think if you said to them, oh, let's think about being a teacher? And he said, Dad, they just see that as social work. See, not improvement and academic standards and excellence, but some form of pastoral care, social work inside a school. So that's a perception about teaching among young people now that we need to change. We've got to get back to teaching as an honoured, valued profession in our society, pay them more, but also introduce professional standards that mean that the highest performers do well financially and all their professional rewards, and those who aren't up to the job. And I'm afraid we've got some teachers like that in New South Wales. Well, we're better off if they find a different job where they can perform a bit better.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think hopefully that's not too annoying, that power saw. Yeah, certainly think that your HSC results are not the be all and end all. If it's about finding your passion, and you can become good in different areas.
Yeah, but Mark, it's easy to say that, but if you live in a disadvantaged suburb, if you're growing up in a public housing estate in Campbelltown, no one knocks on your door and introduces on a platter, here's your passion in life and here's a job, or here's a relative who can get you into their business. All you've got, and I grew up in a public housing estate in Liverpool, I can tell you all you've got are your school results. That's all you've got. And if you haven't got those, well, I can take you to places where they're 4th generation unemployed. And it's a desperate welfare dependency. So I know some people say the HSC is not the be all and end all, very true in a lot of middle class families. But boy, if we want a fair and equal society, it's the great leg up you can give young people who come from a disadvantaged background, where their parents have not had any education, they haven't worked, they're on welfare, up and down the street, there's no success stories. I mean, it's only schools who get those kids out of desperate situations.
Yeah, point well made, I think, and thank you for that. And certainly Rotary is, our club is interested in supporting young people in our public school education system, and we're doing as much as we can in those areas. So for anyone on the at the meeting today, then visit Rotary and visit youth committees, or as some clubs call it, new generations, and find out about what Rotary is doing to help young people in underprivileged areas. Can I just ask one question? We're so much out of time. A high level question, I think. When you were in, running to be our Prime Minister back in 2004, your party and the other two major parties, I suppose, the Liberal National Party, received something like 84% of the primary vote. In 2019, in the federal election, they received 75% of the primary vote. I wonder whether you have a comment on what is happening, why that might have occurred. Is that continuing? What the impact of that is? Is it destabilizing? Is it destabling our economy? Is it a good thing?
Well, I think it's a product of results. You'd have to say, looking back in the broad sweep of Australian history, that people were pretty happy with the Menzies government in the 50s and 60s. It had its critics, but that's politics. But you'd have to say post-war reconstruction and growth was good. The Whitlam government for 3 years was incredibly turbulent, but created institutions and services like Medicare that we now can't live without. Thank goodness for Medicare in this time of health crisis. And then the Fraser government, I suppose, is criticised, didn't really do much. I suppose that's true. But you go to the 80s and 90s and through to 2007, you'd have to say the period of Hawke, Keating, Howard government was a golden era in Australian governments growing the economy, delivering services, fairly respected in terms of their leadership. But after that, 2007 to 13, the Rudd-Gillard-Rudd fiasco. I mean, you couldn't script a worse period of Labor government for instability. They created their own instability. And then through Abbott, Turnbull, Morrison, a lot of leadership changes. You can't really point to any significant economic reforms, and heavy criticism now of the Prime Minister for the vaccination rollout, the states for what appears to be, in New South Wales at least, a lockdown that's not working. The public pays on results, and they will look at minor parties and independents if the major parties aren't getting the job done. So I think that's where it comes from, and it's up to the major parties to go back to the things they did well in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah. Look, thank you very much, Mr. Latham. Really pleased to meet you. We are out of time, and I have someone here who'd like to offer a vote of thanks to you. And that person is Mr. Jeffrey Little, coming to us today from the beautiful rural suburb of Dubbo, the rural town of Dubbo, I should say. Jeffrey, if you
The,
can
the
unmute.
burgeoning metropolis of Dubbo. Mark.
Indeed it is. Thank you.
Fine, thank you, President Mark. Mark, I won't overstate it. I'm a conservative. I'm right of Genghis Khan, so there's not a lot that I've ever had that's been very common with your own view in years gone by. But you've morphed in my personal view, and you know, your intellect just supersedes parochialism these days, and we're very grateful to your contribution. You speak common sense and pragmatism. Your talk today, Fight for Freedom, is very relevant and applicable today. I've had my second vax as of yesterday, so no one can change my mind, and it's too late to change my mind, and I'm still vertical. So you know, we all have our very strong views about this one way or the other. I'd just like to thank you for your articulate and very lucid presentation today, and also your great work in establishing the Outsiders on Sunday morning. I don't know what I'd do without my dose of Outsiders Sunday morning on Sky, and I think you created it. You were the original convener for that, and thanks for launching that on behalf of us all who love to watch it, and it's great to see you when you do appear on Outsiders. Come back for a command performance. I think, as you might be aware, we do have some parliamentary members of the Rotary Club of Sydney, mainly because they only operate up the road from us, and I'm sure I wouldn't be speaking out of place if we extend a cordial invitation to you to join us at the Rotary Club of Sydney. You'd be a great asset as a member of the club, as our other parliamentary representatives, whom you may very well know. I've got a daughter, at least, who's in education and is a psychologist, and brothers and sisters, all educationists. And I was in schools myself, and I was in the police school lecturing area of work years ago, and even as a workplace teacher in TAFE. So very connected to your views about education and the value of it. And it's a terrible thing, you know, when your own children don't want to send their kids to the public school system, but rather do it to a private Catholic school, because they think it's a much better system and much more disciplined. You're right about education. It's gone a bit too woke, and we're all horrified, we conservative types anyway, at what we see in the public education system these days, not only here but in other places, and we take on board your comments about that. And I think probably most of us, about 99%, in agreement with you. And there's nothing much you said that would put you in any other category but that of a very worthy and commendable individual who is doing his best for his kids and the citizens of New South Wales. And we do thank you for your service, Mark. It's been wonderful to meet you vicariously as it is today. We'd love to see more of you, and we certainly love to see you become a Rotarian if you're not already. And with that, on behalf of us all, thank you very much for your presentation and your attendance today.
Yeah, thanks,
thanks, Jeffrey. Thanks for those kind words, and thanks everyone for listening in. And I look forward to that opportunity to meet in person.
And Jeffrey forgot to mention, Mark, that it is customary for us to make a donation in the name of our speakers, in your name, to our Rotary Give Every Child a Future, which is vaccinating 100,000 people with much needed vaccinations in the Pacific Islands. So we're pleased to be able to do that in your name. If I can just conclude now by saying a big thank you to Michael Newman, who I picked on earlier on. Michael, I hope you don't hold that against me, and I thank you for your contribution today. And indeed for every one of our visitors who has joined us today. If you are interested in being more involved, getting more active in what Rotary does, then I urge you to search Rotary on your browser and get involved. I want to thank everybody for coming this week. Next week, we have a fantastic speaker as well. It's Jackie Munro, and she's talking about communities keeping tech, and that will be a fantastic presentation. So please do join us. You'll hear from us about that. Thank you all, and I bid you a very enjoyable afternoon. Bye for now.